Hey, for letting my husband reveal that I paid for dinner after my dad mocked me? I'm Olivia, 42, Richard and Carol's younger daughter, Meredith's little sister, and Daniel's wife. In my family, I'm the one people call when a printer won't work, when a bill is due before Friday, or when someone needs the kind of favor they later pretend never happened. I keep spare batteries in a kitchen drawer, answer texts with actual details instead of thumbs-up emojis, and for years I thought being reliable would eventually count as being seen. That was my mistake. My family saw me just fine. They just preferred the version where Meredith shined and I stayed useful. Meredith is 45, and she has always known how to enter a room like it was already waiting for her. I don't mean that as an insult. When we were kids, she could convince cousins to play whatever game she invented, get adults to laugh when she interrupted, and turn a plain school award into a whole family celebration. My father loved that about her. Richard liked boldness, or at least the kind that looked good in pictures. At birthday dinners, he introduced Meredith with stories. This one never walked into life quietly, he'd say, pointing at her like he had discovered confidence himself. She makes things happen. Then he'd get to me and soften his voice. And Olivia is our steady one. Always dependable. Dependable sounds like praise until people use it as a reason to expect everything and acknowledge nothing. My mother, Carol, called herself the neutral one. She was good at smoothing napkins over cracks in the table. If my father said something sharp, Mom would tilt her head and say, "He didn't mean it that way." If Meredith took credit for something I had done, Mom would squeeze my arm and whisper, "Don't make it awkward. You know your sister just has that spark." For a long time I accepted that. I told myself every family had roles. Meredith got applause. I got phone calls that started with, "Quick favor." The first time I remember feeling erased as an adult was at Mom's birthday lunch, a few years before the anniversary dinner. I found the restaurant, chose the menu, called everyone twice, handled the deposit, and made sure my father didn't forget to invite Mom's old friend Diane. Meredith showed up late with a scarf and a gift bag and hugged Mom like she had flown in from another planet just to be there. When Dad stood to thank everyone, he smiled straight at Meredith. "Meredith, sweetheart, thank you for bringing everybody together," he said. I looked at Mom, waiting for her to correct him. She looked down at her plate. Later in the parking lot, I said, "Mom, I planned the lunch." She sighed like I had complained about the weather. "We know that. Dad just thanked Meredith for it." "And your sister had a rough month," Mom said. "Can't you just let her have a nice moment?" That became the rhythm of our family. Meredith's rough months required my silence. My rough months required maturity. There was a memorial luncheon for a relative where I paid the final invoice because Mom had forgotten the deadline and didn't want Dad to know. Meredith stood beside Dad in the receiving line while he told people. Meredith handled so much of this. She has a gift for honoring family. I was standing 6 feet away with the emailed receipt on my phone. There was a family photo project where I stayed up half the night scanning old pictures after Meredith promised she'd do it and then got overwhelmed. When the photo book arrived, Meredith posted it in the family chat with, "So glad I could help preserve our history." People sent heart emojis. Mom sent, "Our Meredith always comes through." I typed, "I scanned most of those," then deleted it. That was the part I'm not proud of. I deleted a lot of things. Daniel noticed long before I admitted anything out loud. We've been married long enough that he can tell the difference between my normal quiet and the kind of quiet where I'm swallowing words whole. One night after a family dinner, he drove us home without saying much. My father had spent 10 minutes talking about Meredith's vision for a future family reunion after I had been the one calling venues and getting quotes for her idea. When we pulled into the driveway, Daniel turned off the car and didn't open his door. "Why do you keep doing this?" he asked. I unbuckled my seatbelt. "Doing what?" "Helping people who treat you like a backup plan. They're my family." "I know." His voice was calm, which made it worse. "But they're not asking for family help. They're taking your work, putting Meredith's name on it, and telling you you're jealous if you notice." I stared through the windshield at the dark garage door. "I don't want to create a scene." "Olivia," he said, "I'm not asking you to fight them. I'm asking why they're allowed to fight you with jokes." I didn't have an answer that didn't make me sound pathetic, so I opened the car door and said I was tired. The anniversary dinner started as one of Mom's big ideas. My parents were celebrating a major milestone, and Mom wanted it to look warm, polished, and important. A rented private event room, floral centerpieces, printed programs, a slideshow, champagne glasses lined up on the tables, framed family photos near the guest book. Dad loved the idea once he realized people would be watching him love the idea. Meredith volunteered to shape the tribute, which mostly meant she sent dramatic emails and promised things she didn't actually finish. She wrote, "I'm so honored to pull this evening together for Mom and Dad," in a family email, and everyone started replying like she had rented the room with her own hands. "Meredith, you're amazing. Your parents must be so proud. Only you could make this special." I was reading those replies on my phone while sitting at my kitchen table with a vendor invoice open on my laptop. The first money call from Mom came 3 months before the dinner. I let it go to voicemail because I was making dinner, and when I played it back, her voice had that breathless little tremble she used when she wanted help but didn't want to call it help. "Liv, honey, call me when you can. It's nothing terrible. I just need to ask you something before your father gets worked up." When I called back, she launched straight into it. "The private room deposit is due tomorrow," she said. "I thought we had more time, but apparently the paperwork says otherwise. Your father will be humiliated if we have to scale back after telling people." "Where's Meredith on this?" I asked. "She's helping with the tribute." "That's not what I asked." Mom went quiet for a second. Then she said, "Meredith is between things right now, and she said she can help reimburse after Friday." "After Friday? Don't say it like that." I paid the deposit. 2 weeks later, it was the florist. Mom sent me a screenshot with the words, "Please don't tell your father. I just need you to keep this quiet until after the dinner." Then it was the printer for the programs because Meredith's friend who could do it cheaper disappeared. Then the slideshow file crashed the night before the draft was supposed to be reviewed, so I rebuilt it on my laptop, cropped blurry photos, fixed the order, and removed 3 duplicates where Dad looked irritated because Mom said he would complain. Every time I helped, Mom thanked me like she was embarrassed by the words. "I appreciate you," she'd say. "You're the only one I can count on not to make things worse." First, I thought that meant she saw me. Now I understand it meant she knew exactly who could be pressured into silence. Meredith's reimbursement texts became their own little comedy, except nobody was laughing. "Friday for sure," she wrote the first time. Then, "My transfer is delayed. So annoying." Then, "Can we talk after the event? I don't want money stress ruining the vibe." When I replied, "You told Mom you were covering half of the final invoice," Meredith sent back. "I said I'd contribute. Don't turn family into a spreadsheet." That line sat in my stomach for days. A week before the dinner, Mom accidentally forwarded me an email chain. She meant to send me the updated program proof, but she left the older messages attached. I saw Dad's name, then Mom's, then Meredith's. The first thing I noticed was the program credit. Family Tribute Coordinator, Meredith. I had paid the printer. I had corrected the dates under the old photos. I had rebuilt the slideshow file after Meredith sent me a folder named Final Maybe, with half the photos missing. Then I saw Dad's note. "Meredith should be the one we recognize. Olivia is good with details, but details aren't legacy." I read it once, then again, like the sentence might turn into something else if I stared hard enough. Details aren't legacy. The deposits I paid were details. The invoices I covered were details. The phone calls I made to stop Mom from crying were details. The slideshow, the programs, the guest list, the corrected menu, the florist payment, the check-in calls, the repaired photo captions, all details. Meredith's name was legacy. I didn't respond right away. I put my phone face down on the counter and washed a mug that was already clean. Daniel came into the kitchen and saw my face. "What happened?" I handed him the phone. He read the email chain silently. His jaw tightened, but he didn't explode. That's one of the reasons I love him. He doesn't use my hurt as an excuse to make himself the loudest person in the room. After a minute, he said, "We're bringing proof." "To the dinner?" "Yes. I'm not walking in there planning to blow up my parents' anniversary." "You don't have to use it," he said. "But you shouldn't walk in with only your patience." I almost argued. The old part of me wanted to say Mom would be devastated, Dad would get defensive, Meredith would cry, and the whole family would say I ruined everything. But another part of me was tired. Not angry in a loud way. Tired in a cold, exact way. So we built a folder. Not gossip. Not every petty thing Meredith had ever done. Not private messages that had nothing to do with the dinner. Just the part of the family story they kept editing out. I printed the venue deposit confirmation with the account numbers blacked out. I printed the florist invoice. I printed the program payment. I printed the message where Mom wrote, "Please don't mention this to your father. He'll be humiliated." I printed Meredith's repayment promises and her Friday for sure texts. I printed the email where she accepted praise for pulling the evening together. Daniel helped me make a one-page timeline with dates, payments, and who was publicly credited afterward. He titled the PDF, "The Part of the Speech Dad Skipped." I thought that was too much at first. Then I looked at Dad's email again. Details aren't legacy. I kept the title. The sharpest thing in that folder wasn't even about the dinner. It was a redacted payment notice connected to Meredith. 2 months earlier, Mom had called me crying because Meredith had used the family name and one of Dad's old contacts to secure a personal loan. She missed payments, and the lender started calling Mom because Meredith had listed her as a backup contact. Mom asked me to help her understand the notice before Dad found out. "Your father cannot know before the anniversary," Mom said. "It would crush him. Maybe he should know if he's planning to make Meredith responsible for family money," I said. Mom went still. "Who told you that?" Nobody had to. The forwarded email chain included a note about Dad wanting to announce that Meredith would oversee a small family legacy account tied to sentimental property and future upkeep costs. He wrote that Meredith understood legacy. I remember laughing once when I saw that, but it came out more like a cough. Meredith couldn't repay me for flowers, but Dad was about to announce her as the steward of family legacy. I didn't plan to expose the loan unless they forced the bigger lie. I didn't want to make the night about punishing my sister. I wanted my father to stop using me as the footnote under Meredith's headline. The night of the dinner, Daniel and I arrived early because of course we did. The room looked beautiful, which somehow made me feel worse. The floral centerpieces I paid for sat in the middle of white tablecloths. The printed programs were stacked beside each plate. The slideshow I had repaired was looping through old photos. Mom in a blue dress, Dad holding Meredith as a baby, me missing 2 front teeth, Meredith at a graduation, all of us at a picnic table years ago before the rolls hardened into concrete. Mom hurried over in a soft dress and nervous smile. "Liv, thank goodness. The slideshow remote is acting weird." I looked at Daniel. He looked back at me, waiting. I said, "Where's Meredith?" Mom blinked. "She's on her way. Then she can fix it when she gets here. She's the tribute coordinator." Mom's smile tightened. "Don't start tonight." I didn't start anything. Tonight is not the night for old feelings. Then maybe tonight shouldn't include old habits. She stared at me like she didn't recognize my voice. Then she lowered hers. "Please," she said. "For me." That used to work. It almost worked again. I fixed the remote anyway, but I didn't apologize for the comment. Meredith arrived 20 minutes late with glossy hair, a dramatic shawl, and the kind of entrance that made people turn their heads. Dad lit up. Mom rushed over and hugged her like she had just saved the event by stepping into it. "There she is," Dad said loudly. "The one who made this night happen." I felt Daniel's hand brush mine under the edge of the table. He didn't squeeze hard. Just enough to remind me I wasn't imagining it. Dinner was fine at first, which is how these things get you. People ate chicken, passed bread, laughed about old vacations, and told my parents they looked wonderful. Aunt Joanne, who is married to Dad's brother, sat 2 tables over and waved at me with a kind smile. A cousin leaned over and said the programs were beautiful. "Meredith has such good taste," she added. I took a sip of water so I wouldn't say anything too early. The speech came after dessert. Dad loved a microphone. He tapped it twice, laughed when it squealed, and said, "Well, I promise not to talk too long," which meant everyone settled in for a while. He talked about marriage, family, sacrifice, and the pride of seeing your children carry your values forward. Mom dabbed at her eyes. People smiled. Meredith sat near the front with one hand over her heart like she was receiving an award by association. Then Dad turned toward her. Meredith has always known how to walk into a room and make our name mean something, he said. She takes risks. She leads. She reminds me that family legacy isn't just what you inherit. It's what you're brave enough to build. People clapped. Meredith blinked fast, performing humility with impressive timing. I looked at the program beside my plate. Family Tribute Coordinator, Meredith. Dad continued. And Olivia has her gifts too. My stomach tightened before he even finished the sentence. Every family needs someone steady, he said. Someone comfortable carrying the luggage for people going somewhere. A few people laughed. Not big laughter. The uncomfortable kind, where people join in because the man with the microphone is smiling. Mom looked at me and I knew that look. Said, "Don't you dare." Meredith smiled like it was harmless. Daniel placed his napkin on the table. He stood slowly. Not dramatic. Not angry. He didn't raise his voice, but the room was small enough that he didn't have to. Then thank Olivia for paying for the stage you're using to insult her. The laughter died in pieces. Dad's smile froze. Mom's hand flew to her necklace. Meredith's face lost color so fast I knew she understood exactly where Daniel was going. For a second nobody moved. The slideshow behind Dad paused on a photo of Meredith and me as kids, both of us grinning with popsicle stains on our shirts. It felt cruel the way old pictures make liars out of everyone. Dad gave a short laugh into the microphone. "Daniel, I think you misunderstood a father's joke." Daniel stayed standing. "I understood it." Mom leaned toward me and hissed, "Olivia, stop him." I looked at her. Funny how it was fine when Dad had the microphone. Meredith stood halfway, then sat again. "This is ridiculous." "Olivia, seriously? You're doing this now." "I haven't done anything yet," I said. Dad set the microphone down but kept his hand on it, like he could still control the room through touch. "This is not the place," he said. I pushed my chair back and stood. My legs felt steady, which surprised me. I had imagined this moment a dozen times, and in every version my hands shook. They didn't. "No," I said. "This is exactly the place. You made it the place when you measured my value in front of everyone." Mom whispered my name. It sounded less like comfort and more like a warning. I picked up the folder from the chair beside Daniel, where it had sat all night under his jacket. "I wasn't going to use this," I said. "I hoped I wouldn't have to." Meredith let out a laugh that cracked at the end. "You brought a folder to Mom and Dad's anniversary dinner? That's insane." "You brought my money and wore it like applause," I said. "So no, I don't think the folder is the weird part." A few phones buzzed at once when I sent the redacted PDF to the family group chat. Then more. Around the room people looked down. Aunt Joan pulled reading glasses out of her purse and put them on with a seriousness that almost made me laugh. The PDF was short. I made sure of that. No one needed a novel. They needed dates. I said. I paid the venue deposit from my account. I paid for the flowers after Mom said the florist needed final payment. I paid for the printed programs with Meredith's name on them. I rebuilt the slideshow that Meredith was credited for on my laptop the night before the proof deadline. And I covered the catering gap with a transfer Mom asked me to keep quiet because Dad would be embarrassed. Dad said, "Enough." "No," I said. "You had your speech." The room went so still I could hear someone's fork settle against a plate. Mom's face had gone blotchy. Tonight was supposed to be about love, not receipts. "Receipts paid for tonight," I said. "You knew that." Meredith shook her head. "Family isn't supposed to keep score." I looked at her. "You taught me to keep receipts every time you denied the bill existed." Her mouth opened then closed. Aunt Joan looked up from her phone. "Richard, did you know Olivia paid for tonight?" Dad adjusted his jacket, even though he wasn't wearing it crooked. "That is not the point." Aunt Joanne's expression changed. She had always been pleasant in that careful extended family way, but now there was steel in her voice. "It sounds like it is exactly the point." Dad looked at Mom. Mom looked at Meredith. Meredith looked at me like I had betrayed a rule none of them ever had to say out loud. I opened the folder and placed the printed timeline on the side table near the microphone. I didn't put unrelated personal information in there. I said. I didn't send this to strangers. I sent it to the same people who got the performance. A cousin at the back murmured, "Oh my God," while scrolling. Another guest whispered, "She paid the florist?" Mom pressed a tissue under her eye. "You're humiliating your sister." I turned to her. "No, I'm correcting the credits," Meredith snapped. "You've been waiting for a chance to embarrass me. Actually, I've spent years avoiding chances to embarrass you." My voice stayed even, but my chest felt hot. "I covered payments. I fixed mistakes. I let you accept praise because Mom said you were fragile and Dad said I was jealous. I wasn't standing behind stronger people. I was holding up people who kept taking bows." Daniel shifted beside me, but he didn't step in. This was mine. Dad picked up the microphone again, then seemed to realize using it would make him look worse. He set it down. "Olivia," he said in the voice he used when he wanted to sound like a reasonable man surrounded by unreasonable women, "you are taking a father's joke and turning it into an accusation." "No. I'm taking your accusation and showing the invoice under it." Aunt Joanne was still reading. "Carol," she said, "these texts say you asked her not to tell Richard." Mom's tears started properly then. I was trying to keep peace. Aunt Joanne looked at her over the top of her glasses. Peace and silence are not the same thing. For the first time that night, Mom didn't have a soft answer ready. Meredith grabbed her phone and scrolled through the PDF. "You included my repayment texts?" "Yes. You made me look broke. You made me look bitter for asking to be repaid. I never asked you to act like a martyr. You didn't have to. You just kept sending invoices through Mom." That hit harder than I expected. Meredith's eyes flicked to Mom, then away. Dad's face was red now. This family does not air private matters in public. I laughed once. I couldn't help it. "You made me the public punchline," I said. "Don't act offended that the punchline came with context." That was when Daniel spoke again, brief and calm. "She didn't want revenge," he said. "She wanted you to stop lying about her." Then he stepped back, literally taking one step behind me, so no one could pretend he was speaking for me. I took a breath and opened the last page of the folder. "There's one more thing," I said. Mom's head snapped up. "Olivia, don't." That told the room more than I had. I said, "Dad planned to announce tonight that Meredith would help oversee the family legacy account." Dad's eyes sharpened. "How do you know about that?" "Because Mom accidentally forwarded me the email chain where you said Meredith understood legacy, and I only handled details." Someone near the back muttered, "Jesus." I held up the redacted payment notice. 2 months ago, Mom asked me to help her read this because Meredith used the family name in one of Dad's contacts to get a personal loan, then missed payments. Mom knew. She hid it because she didn't want Dad's opinion of Meredith damaged before the dinner. Meredith's voice went thin. "That was private." "So were the payments I made," I said, until Dad used my silence to explain why I mattered less. Dad turned to Mom. "Carol." Mom clutched the tissue in her fist. "I was going to tell you after the anniversary." "No, you weren't," I said quietly. She looked at me then, and for once she didn't try to soften the truth. She looked scared and sad and angry that I had stopped being useful at the wrong time. Aunt Joanne folded the printed program in half and set it down beside her plate. "Meredith," she said, "did you take credit for work you didn't do?" Meredith's mascara had started to smudge at the corners of her eyes. "I never said I did everything. That is not what I asked." Meredith stared at her phone. The answer sat there in the silence. The night didn't explode into screaming. Honestly, that would have been easier. Instead, it curdled. People stopped making eye contact with my father. A family friend who had laughed at the luggage joke pushed back his chair and said they had an early morning. A cousin came over, hugged me awkwardly and whispered, "I'm sorry I laughed. I didn't know." I said, "That's why he said it in a room full of people who didn't know." She winced, but she nodded. Mom tried to restart dessert. Nobody wanted coffee anymore. The servers moved around us with the professional blank faces of people who had witnessed family disasters before and knew better than to react. Dad stood in a corner with 2 older relatives, talking too quietly for me to hear. Meredith sat with Mom, crying in the careful way people cry when they still want witnesses. Aunt Joanne stayed at her table reading through the timeline like she was checking a contract. When Daniel and I decided to leave, Mom followed us to the hall. "Olivia, wait." I stopped but didn't turn around right away. She lowered her voice. "You hurt your father deeply tonight." That old pull hit me. The reflex to explain, soften, fix. I could almost feel myself reaching for the emotional broom. Then I looked back at the room, at the flowers I paid for, the programs with Meredith's name on them, and my father standing beneath the slideshow I repaired after calling me luggage with a microphone in his hand. "I know," I said. "I think he'll survive being embarrassed one time." Mom flinched. "That's cruel." "No," Daniel said beside me. "Cruel was letting him insult her while you knew she paid for the evening." Mom looked at him like he had broken some sacred rule. "She is my daughter," she said. "So is Olivia," he replied. Mom didn't answer. In the car I expected to cry. I didn't. I sat with my hands in my lap and watched the lights from the entrance shrink behind us. Daniel asked, "Are you okay?" "No," I said. "But I'm not sorry." "Good." That felt awful. "I know. And a little satisfying." He glanced at me, then back at the road. "Also good." I laughed for the first time all night, just one tired breath. By the time we got home, my phone was a mess. The family group chat had gone from silence to chaos, then back to silence again. Dad sent the first direct text. "You embarrassed this family tonight." I stared at it while Daniel made tea. I wrote back, "No. You embarrassed me first." I stopped covering the truth. He didn't respond. Mom left a voicemail at 12:18 a.m. I didn't answer, but the transcription was enough. "Everyone is upset. Your father is devastated. Meredith can barely speak. I know things weren't handled perfectly, but there was no need to do it that way. Please call me before this gets worse." Before this gets worse. Not before we apologize. Not before we make it right. Before this gets worse for them. Meredith texted next. "Can we talk privately?" I replied. "Put repayment terms in writing." She came back fast. "Can we not make this legal and weird?" I typed, deleted, typed again. "You made it weird when you let me pay and took the applause." She didn't answer until morning. I slept badly, but not because I regretted it. I slept badly because my body didn't know what to do without the usual assignment. Normally after family conflict, I replayed every sentence, found my own faults, planned apologies for things I hadn't caused, and waited for Mom's call so I could help put the room back together. This time I woke up, made coffee, and didn't check my missed calls until after I finished the first cup. There were 7 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, 1 from Aunt Joanne, and a bunch of messages in the family chat. I opened Aunt Joanne's first. "I owe you an apology," she wrote. "I believed the version I heard for years. I should have asked more questions." I sat at the kitchen table and read that twice. Then another message came from a cousin. "I don't want to get in the middle, but I'm sorry for laughing. I think we all laughed because we only had half the story." That one got me more than I expected. Not because it fixed anything, but because someone had finally admitted there was a story I hadn't been allowed to tell. Dad's morning message was not an apology. "I regret that things got uncomfortable last night, but you chose to make private family business public at a celebration meant for your mother and me." I sent back. "That is not an apology. That is a complaint about consequences." He replied, "You have always been sensitive about Meredith." I almost laughed. The man had watched his anniversary dinner collapse under the weight of receipts, and he still reached for the oldest tool in the drawer. I wrote, "I can be proud of Meredith and still not want to be erased." Then I put my phone down. Mom tried a different route around noon. She called Daniel. He looked at the screen, then at me. "Your mother." "Answer it," I said. He put it on speaker after saying, "Carol, Olivia is here with me." There was a pause. Mom clearly hadn't expected transparency. "Daniel," she said carefully, "can you talk to her? She listens to you." Daniel leaned against the counter. "She listens to herself now. You should try it. Please don't be unkind." "I'm not being unkind. I'm being direct. She is going to tear the family apart over money." "No," Daniel said. "Money is just the part with receipts. The tearing happened when you all decided her work counted only when no one could see it." Mom started crying. I was trying to protect everyone. You protected everyone from consequences except Olivia. She hung up a minute later after saying she couldn't talk while being attacked. For the first time, Daniel didn't look guilty after a call with my family. He looked tired but clear. Aunt Joanne called that evening. I almost ignored it because I was done with family voices, but something about her message made me answer. I'm not calling to lecture you, she said. Good, because I'm out of polite nods. She gave a small laugh. Fair. I just wanted you to know I spoke to your mother. I closed my eyes. I'm sure that went well. It didn't. That made me open them. I told her peace built on your silence isn't peace, Aunt Joanne said. She cried. Richard is angry. Meredith is embarrassed. None of that changes what was in those documents. I didn't know what to say. Aunt Joanne continued. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I swallowed hard. They were pretty committed to making sure nobody did. Yes, she said. And you were pretty committed to helping them. It wasn't cruel. It was accurate. I know, I said. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and made one final document. Not a dramatic one. Not a burn it all down message. Just boundaries. I sent it to the family chat because that was where Meredith had accepted praise, where Mom had asked for unity, where Dad had spent years performing pride in one daughter and tolerance for the other. I wrote, after last night I need to be clear. I am no longer available to fund, fix, or hide problems for people who erase me afterward. I will not pay for family events unless the arrangement is documented and honestly acknowledged. I will not cover Meredith's debts, shortages, or miss deadlines through Mom. I will not attend gatherings where jokes are made at my expense and then called harmless. If this pattern continues, I will leave. Meredith, any repayment needs to be in writing by Friday. Mom, do not call Daniel to soften boundaries I set myself. Dad, I will respond to an actual apology, not a message about how uncomfortable consequences feel. Then I turned off notifications. Felt strange. Not triumphant. More like setting down a heavy bag I had carried so long that my arm still curled around the shape of it. Meredith sent repayment terms the next day. They were vague at first. I can probably start next month and send what I can. I replied. Amount and dates. She wrote. You're really going to treat me like some random person? I stared at that for a while. Then I answered, no. A random person wouldn't have gotten this many chances. Eventually she sent a schedule. It wasn't perfect, but it was written down. That mattered. Mom sent a long message 2 days later that started with, I'm sorry you felt unappreciated. So I didn't respond. 3 hours after that she sent another. I'm sorry I asked you to keep things quiet, and then didn't defend you when your father made that joke. I told myself I was keeping peace. I see now that I was asking you to pay for it. I read it several times. It was the closest she had come to the truth. I still didn't rush to comfort her. Dad held out the longest. For a week, nothing. Then one evening a message came through. I should not have made that joke. That was all. A year earlier I would have grabbed it like a gift. I would have called Mom and said I knew Dad meant well. I would have patched the silence before anyone else had to sit in it. This time I wrote, that is a start. It does not address the years of credit you gave Meredith for work I did, or the fact that you dismissed me as jealous when I spoke privately. I'm not discussing this at a family event. Put what you want to say in writing. He didn't answer that night. I didn't chase him. The fallout wasn't clean. Some relatives avoided the subject completely, which told me plenty. A few clearly thought I should have kept quiet until after the dinner, as if humiliation has a polite waiting period when you are the one receiving it. Meredith stopped posting in the family chat for a while. Mom became careful around me in a way that was better than guilt but not quite respect yet. Dad stopped using the word legacy in my presence. The biggest change was practical. The calls slowed down. Not completely. Mom still tried once to ask if I could just look over a vendor quote for a cousin's shower. I said, no, I'm not available for event planning. She said it would only take 10 minutes. I said, then Meredith can handle it. There was a long silence. Then Mom said, all right. I sat there holding the phone after she hung up, stunned by how small the boundary had been and how enormous it felt. A month later, Meredith missed the first repayment date by 1 day. In the past, I would have waited quietly, then felt guilty for reminding her. This time I sent one text. Payment was due yesterday. She sent it 20 minutes later. No apology. No explanation. Just the transfer. I accepted it and did not say thank you for receiving money I was owed. That might sound petty to some people. Maybe it is. But when you spend years being trained to thank people for doing the bare minimum after they benefit from you, not saying thank you feels like learning a new language. The family never fully returned to what it had been. That was the point. There were no magical group hugs. Dad didn't give a tearful speech about how wrong he had been. Meredith didn't transform into a humble sister overnight. Mom didn't stop crying whenever accountability entered the room. But the system changed because I stopped feeding it. At the next family dinner I attended, Dad started to make a joke when someone asked why Meredith wasn't organizing a reunion anymore. He said, "Well, Olivia probably has a folder for that too." The table went quiet. I set down my fork and looked at him. "I can leave now," I said. He cleared his throat. "It was just a joke." "I know. That's why I'm giving you one chance to choose a better one." Aunt Joan coughed into her napkin. Daniel took a sip of water like nothing unusual was happening. Meredith stared at her plate. Dad looked around and for once saw no audience waiting to rescue him with laughter. He said, "Never mind." I picked up my fork and kept eating. That was when I understood the real victory was not the folder, or the PDF, or the look on Meredith's face when the room realized she hadn't paid for the tribute she was credited for. Those moments were satisfying and I won't pretend they weren't. But they were not the victory. The victory was the silence after Dad said, "Never mind." The victory was Mom no longer being able to call Daniel behind my back without him naming the move out loud. The victory was Meredith putting dates and amounts in writing because vague promises no longer bought my protection. The victory was me waking up, making coffee, rinsing the pot, and not checking my phone first to see which family emergency wanted to borrow my self-respect. I used to think I wanted my parents to introduce me differently. I wanted Dad to say I was impressive. I wanted Mom to correct the record without being forced. I wanted Meredith to admit that being helped did not make her better than the person helping. Maybe some of that will happen one day. Maybe it won't. I'm done organizing my life around the possibility. I didn't expose my family because I wanted to be the favorite daughter. I exposed them because my father used a microphone to turn my years of labor into a joke. And for once, I let the bill come due in front of the people who had enjoyed the performance. That night, I stopped being the quiet daughter. Not because I wanted the spotlight, but because I was tired of paying for it while someone else stood in it. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.